They never told you the truth. They told you if you're kind, you'll be protected. If you're honest, people will respect you. If you're good, life will reward you. But what if I told you that's the most dangerous lie you were ever taught? Not because goodness has no value, but because when it's not paired with strength, strategy, or discernment, it becomes the perfect camouflage for those who wish to use you. There was once a woman named Clara, a teacher in Florence, Italy. Loved by her students, admired by parents, committed to shaping young minds. She brought snacks for hungry kids, bought books from her own pocket, stayed after hours to tutor teens society had already given up on. She lived for others. She gave and gave and gave, and the world took. She watched colleagues get credit for her work. She stayed silent while others who played the political game better got promoted. She told the truth, only to be isolated. She played fair, only to be left behind. And yet, she kept going. Because she believed, deep down, that one day her goodness would be recognized. That one day the universe would repay her in full. That's what they promised her, right? But life doesn't pay its debts in fairness. It pays in power. And Clara had none. Until one day something inside her snapped. It was a Friday afternoon. She had just organized a charity event that raised thousands for underprivileged children. Alone. She printed flyers, called donors, managed volunteers, and in the closing speech, her name wasn't mentioned. Not once. Instead, the applause went to someone else, a smiling, loud, well-connected coworker who hadn't shown up until the cameras did. Clara smiled, clapped, like always. But this time her heart didn't break, it burned, because she finally saw the truth. This is the moment where many good people finally awaken, not through enlightenment, but through betrayal. When the mirror cracks and behind the illusion of justice, they see the machinery of power for what it really is. That's where Clara's real story began. Not when she chose to be good, but when she chose to stop being only good. We like to pretend the world is a meritocracy, that doing the right thing leads to the right results. But open your eyes, look around. The people you admire, are they just good, or are they good and strategic? Niccolò Machiavelli, writing from a time of ruthless politics and fragile alliances, was condemned for being cold. But he wasn't cold, he was clear. He said, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." And for those who understand human nature, it makes painful sense. Because the world doesn't reward purity, it rewards perception, it rewards presence, it rewards power. And this is where many of us fall. We were taught to lead with our hearts, but no one taught us how to protect it. You may think you're safe because your intentions are good, but intentions don't stop betrayal. They don't prevent manipulation. They don't shield you from becoming invisible. Goodness is not a shield, it's a spotlight. And unless you know how to carry it with strength, it exposes you to all the wrong people. And here's the twist. It's not your fault. You were raised in a culture that taught obedience over observation. That said, do the right thing and keep your head down. That taught you to fear conflict more than compromise. But Clara's story, like yours, doesn't have to end in silence. Because there's another way to be good. A deeper, wiser way. One that Machiavelli would respect. Not by abandoning kindness, but by sharpening it. Not by becoming hard, but by becoming smart. Not by giving less, but by choosing who deserves what you give. Machiavelli didn't ask you to be a villain. He asked you to stop being prey. You can still be kind, still be generous, still be compassionate, but you must also be discerning, strategic, aware. You must learn to see the game before you're played by it. The world is filled with people who wear smiles like masks, opportunists who can spot your kindness from across the room and treat it like a doorway to walk through. And if you've ever wondered why they rise while you're overlooked, why they're praised while you're passed over, it's not because they're better. It's because they understand the game. And you were never taught the rules. So now you have a choice. You can cling to the beautiful lie that being good is enough. Or you can awaken to the truth that being good is only powerful when it's paired with strength, silence, and strategy. This is not the death of your compassion. It's the rebirth of your clarity. Because when Clara finally saw the world for what it was, she didn't grow cold. She grew calculating. She spoke less. She observed more. She stopped overgiving. She stopped apologizing for being smart. She stopped playing to be liked and started playing to be heard. And for the first time in years, they listened. Her story, your story, isn't about abandoning your heart. It's about arming it. If this resonated with you, if something deep inside you just shifted, even slightly, then don't leave this moment hanging. Subscribe to the channel, because we're just getting started, and you don't want to miss what comes next. You've spent enough time being overlooked. Now it's time to become unforgettable. Clara's awakening didn't happen overnight. Real transformation rarely does. After the charity event that shattered her illusions, she didn't storm out of her job or change her values. She did something far more radical. She paused. For the first time in years, she stopped pouring herself into everything and everyone. She pulled back, quietly, intentionally, and began to watch. She watched how others operated, how the loudest in the room always seemed to get credit, how charm often beat character, how those who maintained their mystique held more sway than those who were transparent. She watched how people listened not to the most helpful voices, but to the most controlled ones. And slowly, something began to take shape within her. A new kind of kindness, one that no longer led with innocence, but with insight. This was the beginning of what she would later call intelligent kindness. Not a mask, not a game, but a conscious evolution of how to be good in a world that doesn't reward goodness blindly. It was virtue guided by vision, compassion with boundaries, generosity, not as obligation, but as a choice, thoughtful, measured, and powerful. Across the ocean, in the heart of New York City, a man named Marcus was learning the same lesson through different pain. Marcus was a community leader, known for his passionate voice and tireless advocacy for underfunded schools. He gave everything he had, his weekends, his savings, his sanity. People praised him, showed up when cameras rolled, but behind closed doors they vanished when he needed support. He crashed hard. When burnout finally brought him to a standstill, Marcus didn't recognize himself. He was hollowed out from trying to meet everyone's needs. For years, he believed his suffering was proof of his commitment, that sacrificing himself was noble. But slowly, he came to understand the bitter truth. People don't always respect what they can consume freely. They value what is rare, protected, and delivered with intention. It was during this season of silence that Marcus began reshaping the way he approached his purpose. He didn't stop caring. He simply started caring smarter. He began by asking a question that changed everything. Am I giving because I want to, or because I'm afraid not to? That distinction revealed the heart of intelligent kindness, acting from clarity, not compulsion. Marcus started filtering his efforts. He said no without guilt. He stopped over-explaining his decisions. He created space between his cause and his identity. And as he reclaimed his energy, something unexpected happened. People began to listen more closely. They took him more seriously. His presence became less frequent but more powerful. Like Clara, Marcus discovered what Machiavelli hinted at centuries ago. Not that kindness should be abandoned, but that kindness without protection invites destruction. The wise don't become cold, they become calibrated. To be kind in today's world is to carry a flame, but without a lantern to shield it, the wind will extinguish your light long before it reaches its destination. The lantern is strategy, and strategy is not manipulation, it's preservation. It's how you carry your values without being emptied by them. Intelligent kindness means giving from overflow, not depletion. It means recognizing the difference between selflessness and self-erasure. It means noticing who only calls when they need something, who disappears when you draw a boundary, who confuses your silence for surrender, and then choosing how to respond, not react. Marcus began teaching others what he learned, not through lectures, but through example. He mentored younger activists, showing them how to blend passion with pacing, how to lead with empathy without becoming emotional hostages. His leadership matured, deepened, became magnetic, because when you know your worth and give from that place, people feel it. It's not loud, but it resonates. Clara, too, transformed within her sphere. She no longer volunteered for every task. When she spoke at meetings, she didn't fill the air with nervous explanations. She waited, chose her words carefully, and watched the room lean in. Her students still loved her, but now they respected her. Her colleagues, once dismissive, now deferred to her with a subtle edge of caution. She had not become feared. but she was no longer overlooked. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote that power belongs not to the good, but to those who understand human nature and move accordingly. You can be loved, but only if you are first respected. And respect is born from boundaries, not blind sacrifice. The problem isn't that the world is broken. The problem is that most good people are playing the wrong game. They think kindness is enough because they've been told so by those who benefit from their compliance. But what if you reframed kindness as a force of discernment? What if, instead of always saying yes, your goodness became a scalpel, precise, intentional, transformative? Kindness isn't weakness, but it can be misread as such when it lacks structure. Intelligent kindness is the antidote. It invites you to pause before giving, to choose your recipients with care, and to honor your energy as sacred, not disposable. And if you've ever struggled with that, if you've ever felt guilty for saying no, or ashamed for putting yourself first, remember this: kindness that costs you your peace is not kindness. It's a transaction you never agreed to, and it will keep collecting until nothing remains. So give, but give wisely. Speak, but speak with purpose. Love, but love with eyes open. Machiavelli would not ask you to stop being good. He would ask you to become formidable in your goodness. To become someone who can't be guilted into silence, who can't be played, who sees the system clearly but chooses their path with integrity and calculation. That's intelligent kindness. That's what Clara and Marcus discovered, not in theory, but in fire. And it's what you too can claim, if you're willing to stop giving everything to people who offer nothing in return. Because the world doesn't need more broken-hearted givers, it needs wise ones, strategic ones, unshakable ones, and that can be you. There was a time when David thought influence came from volume. Raised in a world that praised authenticity and self-expression, he believed that being open, being available, and being emotionally transparent were signs of strength. He was a young tech entrepreneur in Austin, earnest and ambitious, driven by purpose and the belief that good leadership meant being liked. And for a while it worked, at least on the surface. His team liked him, his investors found him relatable, but something was missing. No one took him seriously. He noticed it in subtle ways. People interrupted him in meetings, his suggestions were passed over until echoed by someone more assertive. He over-explained, over-apologized, over-corrected, all in the name of humility and empathy. But the result, he was perceived as unsure, as soft, as someone who couldn't make the hard calls. And perception, David would come to learn, is everything. Machiavelli understood this before neuroscience or psychology ever confirmed it. People don't respond to who you are. They respond to who they believe you are. The truth doesn't lead, the image does. And if your presence doesn't command attention, the accuracy of your words won't save you. David's turning point came during a high-stakes investor presentation. He had rehearsed for weeks, but halfway through, he caught himself rushing, trying to prove himself. His voice cracked with nervous energy. When the questions came, he answered in long, winding sentences, trying to cover every angle to be honest, transparent, human. But as he spoke, he watched the room drift. Phones came out, eyes glazed. His message was clear, but his delivery, his energy, betrayed his lack of control. Afterward, a mentor pulled him aside and said something that would haunt and heal him all at once. "You're trying too hard to be understood. Power doesn't plead." It was a dagger through the ego, but also the beginning of his rebirth. David stepped back from the startup scene for a while, not to give up, but to recalibrate. He didn't read business books. He studied presence. He watched how influential people carried themselves. He noticed how they rarely rushed, rarely reacted, rarely revealed too much. He paid attention to their pauses, their posture, their ability to make silence feel like a statement. What he learned was profound. The most powerful people don't dominate the conversation. They shape it with restraint. Their strength lies not in speech, but in stillness. Perception, silence, emotional control. These are not soft skills. They are strategic weapons. Perception is how the world interprets your value. It's not just about how competent you are, it's about how confident you appear. It's about what your energy communicates before your mouth does. People draw conclusions in seconds. The way you enter a room, the way you sit, even the way you choose when to speak, it all sends a message. Silence, contrary to what most fear, is not emptiness. It is authority. When you speak less, your words weigh more. When you pause before responding, people lean in. When you don't fill every gap with noise, people start to wonder what you're thinking. And that curiosity is power. And then there's emotional control, the most underestimated strength of all. We're told that being expressive is being real, that vulnerability is connection. And to some extent, it's true. But without control, vulnerability becomes volatility. If every provocation pulls a reaction out of you, you've handed your power to whoever shouts loudest. Machiavelli warned against this centuries ago. A ruler who cannot control his emotions, he said, becomes a puppet to those who can. And in modern terms, emotional mastery is no longer just for kings. It's for anyone who wants to lead in any sphere of life. David began training himself to pause before responding. He practiced what he called the 3-second breath, a silent inhale before answering questions, before reacting to criticism, before defending himself. He noticed how much more respect he gained when he didn't take the bait. He observed how silence unsettled the ones who used to talk over him. He stopped explaining his decisions to everyone. He let his results speak louder, and when he did speak, his voice was calmer, slower, more deliberate. He stopped performing sincerity. He became sincere, anchored in control, and the shift was seismic. The same people who once overlooked him began asking for his opinion. The same investors who dismissed him began leaning forward. His team respected him not because he changed who he was, but because he changed the way they perceived who he was. This is not manipulation. It's mastery. Clara and Marcus, too, had made similar shifts. Clara no longer allowed her warmth to override her wisdom. She taught with the same passion, but she carried herself differently, less accessible, more grounded. Students sensed her quiet power and began to listen more intently. Her colleagues no longer walked over her. They walked beside her. Marcus, once the ever-available advocate, now guarded his presence like it mattered. Because it did. He responded to messages when it suited his energy. He gave talks only when he had something worth saying. He didn't dilute his fire, he directed it. What all three discovered is a truth few people speak aloud. The world does not respond to your goodness. It responds to your gravity. And gravity is created not by constant motion, but by calibrated energy, by restraint, by emotional discipline, by the ability to hold your center when everything around you is designed to unseat it. In the age of endless noise, the one who speaks the least commands the most respect. In a culture addicted to visibility, the one who isn't always available becomes desirable. And in a world where outrage is currency, the one who stays calm is king. So if you find yourself constantly explaining, constantly reacting, constantly trying to prove your value, stop. The most respected people are not the loudest. They are the most composed, the most unpredictable, the most sovereign. Machiavelli would not tell you to shout louder. He would tell you to sharpen your silence. He would tell you that perception is leverage, and if you do not shape it, someone else will do it for you. David's evolution wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about shedding the parts of himself that begged to be seen. Because once he no longer needed validation, he became undeniable. That's the power of perception. That's the art of silence. That's the strength of emotional control. And in a world that rewards performance, those who learn how to hold their stillness, those who learn how to be both kind and unshakable, don't just survive, they lead. Not everyone escapes the trap. Most don't. Most people, like Clara before her awakening, like Marcus before the burnout, and David before learning to lead with stillness, spend years, even decades, trying to fit into a world that does not reward their nature. They try harder, they give more. They explain themselves over and over again. They shrink to avoid conflict, flatter to earn favor, soften their edges hoping the world will love them more for it. But the world rarely rewards goodness unless that goodness is fused with something else: presence, precision, and power. And that's what these three learned to embody. Not by abandoning who they were, but by shedding who the world conditioned them to be. Clara didn't stop being kind. She stopped being unguarded. She stopped allowing her decency to be her downfall. What changed was not her heart, but the way she protected it. She no longer confused being available with being valuable. In that shift, she became magnetic. Marcus didn't stop serving his community. He stopped serving at the expense of himself. He started filtering his energy, treating it like gold rather than water. And what happened? People took him more seriously. He wasn't just the guy who would show up. He became the guy whose time was respected. David didn't stop believing in empathy. He stopped performing it. He stopped trying to make everyone comfortable. And instead, he learned how to move through a room with the weight of someone who doesn't need attention but earns it naturally. What Clara, Marcus, and David all learned, what they each came to live, is that to thrive in this world, you must become the exception. Not the exception to values, but the exception to how values are normally expressed. Not predictable, not overly accessible, not overly emotional, but intentional, restrained, watchful. Not someone who conforms to expectation, but someone who reshapes the expectations placed upon them. Because if you want to make a mark, if you want to be seen, heard, and remembered, you cannot move the way the crowd moves. You cannot always react the way others react. You must disrupt the rhythm, not with rebellion, but with refined clarity. And that's the real lesson here. The ones who lead, the ones who rise, who stay, who shape their world, are not the ones who are the nicest or even the most brilliant. They are the ones who dare to carry themselves differently. They're not the loudest, they're not the most agreeable. They are the ones who walk into the room and say nothing and still change the temperature. Why? Because they've learned that power is not seized through noise. It's earned through strategic presence. So how do you apply this to your life? You start small. You start by watching your own patterns. Are you over-explaining yourself? Stop. Are you saying yes when you mean no? Pause. Are you giving more than you're receiving? Reassess. Start speaking slower. Let your pauses stretch. Let silence do the heavy lifting. Delay your answers. Let people sit in the discomfort of not knowing your next move. Don't rush to fix things that aren't yours to fix. Watch how people shift when you stop making yourself so available. Create distance, but not detachment. Be kind, but not exposed. Let your goodness be a presence, not a performance. Every interaction is a test of energy. People aren't just reading your words. They're reading your posture, your eyes, your tone. They're asking, can I trust them? Can I manipulate them? Will they react or respond? Your job is not to entertain those questions. It's to make them irrelevant. That's what becoming the exception is about. Not needing to be seen in every moment because your presence lingers long after you've left. Not explaining your worth because your silence makes people question why they didn't see it sooner. And most of all, never allowing the world to convince you that being good means being small. It doesn't. Your kindness can be a storm, your compassion a boundary, your silence a force, but only if you learn to wield it. The true master of this world is not the one who dominates others. It's the one who can dominate themselves. Their emotions, their impulses, their reactions, their need to be liked. The most dangerous thing you can be in this world is a good person who is fully awake, someone who has not given up their light but has learned to protect it, someone who sees the game for what it is and plays it with strategy without ever becoming what they despise. Clara, Marcus, David. They didn't lose themselves, they found their edge, and it made all the difference. So the question now is not whether you're capable of change. The question is, are you willing to be the exception? Are you willing to do what most never will? To stop playing to be liked and start walking in your power? To give without leaking? To love without losing? To lead without needing permission? Because the moment you do, the world will shift. Not instantly, but unmistakably. You'll notice it in how people speak to you, in how they pause before interrupting, in how your silence speaks louder than their shouting, in how you stop chasing respect and begin commanding it. This is your turning point. Don't just be another kind soul waiting to be noticed. Be the kind soul who cannot be ignored. Now, I want to hear from you. What part of this story hit home the most? Was it Clara's awakening, Marcus's boundary, or David's emotional discipline? Or perhaps something in you has been quietly shifting as you read this. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's create a space where ideas grow, where power is reclaimed, and where we help each other rise. And if you want more of this, more stories that awaken, more truths that liberate, subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep this conversation alive. That's how we keep building something real. This is just the beginning, and something tells me you're ready for more.